Ohio voters are likely to grapple with the issue of legalizing marijuana this November with a couple of ballot issues that could be there. And we on the editorial board of the Plain Dealer and the Northeast Iowa Media Group are grappling with that issue ourselves. Welcome to a unique version of the Opinion Show where we have not made up our minds on an issue yet. We expect to be debating it for a while, and we thought it would be appropriate to have some of that debate on this show. So the Opinion Show is a gathering of the editorial board for a chat about a local issue. I am here with Opinion Director Elizabeth Sullivan and editorial writers Ted Diadiun, Chris Evans, and Sharon Broussard. I'm going to start with Ted Diadiun, who feels pretty strongly about this issue because of the way he thinks it might affect children. So Ted, could you give some voice to that?
Well, thanks. The rest of you might not have made up your minds, but I have. I think that it would be a very dangerous thing to put the imprimatur of social acceptance on the recreational smoking of marijuana. I think it gives it it encourages people to smoke who ordinarily wouldn't because of legal issues or any other, and I think it would be an entry drug into harder drugs. I know some people don't agree with that, but I think probably most people who do harder drugs started out smoking marijuana and to get high, and then they get a better and better high, and I just think it's a good idea to just not even start that.
And one of the things we talked about last week was the idea that you think there are kids now that don't smoke it because it's illegal. And if it was legalized in some form, it would take the stigma away and make them more likely to experiment with it.
Yeah, I do, and actually kids will rebel. I'm actually thinking more about young adults and people who ordinarily wouldn't get into that because of the legality of it and the danger of getting caught and dealing with with the criminal element, which I guess is an argument for legalization. But I just think it's a good idea to do everything we can to keep people from starting.
Betsy, you don't agree with that, right?
No, and I actually favor the legalization of marijuana. Actually, have done so personally for a long time. Haven't been able to bring the whole editorial board around to that position yet, but and I actually am somewhat sympathetic to the idea of legalizing all drugs. I do think that would allow the issue to be dealt with as a public health issue. And I think that the fact that the federal government still criminalizes marijuana has vastly complicated efforts in the states to deal with this issue and has led to what, to me, is the more troubling part of what's been proposed in Ohio, which is this granting of effective monopolies to certain individuals who are rich enough to invest in the securing of monopoly rights under this constitutional amendment, and then to put money toward passing the issue, which has generated now a counter movement, which is exemplified by the Auditor of State, Dave Yost, who was in here just yesterday talking to our editorial board about his proposal for a competing constitutional amendment that would effectively prevent the use of the constitutional referendum process to allow for any private individuals to be specifically rewarded with what he calls cartel rights in the Ohio Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, and let's try and keep this just on the legalization. We'll address the ballot issues at some further point. Because what we've been talking about really is the idea of legalizing it. Sharon, you've made up your mind as well, right?
Yeah, I'm actually on Ted's side. I do agree with Ted. I think the decriminalization is a good idea, and I would like to see penalties be lessened for it. But I do think that putting the society stamp on it just kind of opens the floodgates. I read a piece recently that Betsy ran in the forum section from a lawyer in Colorado talking about kind of some of the unintended consequences of it, and that I still find troubling. So I'm with Ted for now.
And Chris?
Yes.
You are in favor.
Yes, I am, and I agree with Betsy. I think it should be legalized. I think the argument that it's a gateway drug is debatable. I think that probably for some people it might be, but for the vast majority it isn't. I also think that the social consequences of it being illegal are enormous. I also believe that it has tremendous medicinal value, and they've shown that with everything from epilepsy to nausea that accompanies chemotherapy, to glaucoma, and you know, I think it's a smart thing to do, and I don't think that it's going to encourage younger people to use the drug. I think they're responding to peer pressure. So yeah, I think it's the smart thing to do.
So as you can see, individual members have formed opinions, not me, but overall the board has not come to a decision. I want to take this in a couple of directions. I find the parallels to alcohol striking, and in listening to the people who argue against legalization, I can't help but feel that if they were at the table during Prohibition, they would have argued against the legalization of alcohol, because all of the same things apply. Ted, you've been known to take a drink now and then. I don't think you'd want to go back to Prohibition. How do you reconcile those in your mind?
Well, I just don't think it's a valid point to say, well, because one bad thing is legal, then we ought to make this other bad thing legal. I think, you know, in alcohol, you know, I mow the lawn, I have a beer, and because I'm thirsty, I like the taste of it. With the marijuana, the only reason for smoking marijuana is to alter your mind and brain to get high. That's not why I drink beer. It's not why some people have a post-work martini or something like that. But the only reason to do this is to alter your mind, which leads to harder drugs, in my opinion.
See, I disagree. I mean, you have a beer after you mow the lawn because it relaxes you. I mean, rather than an iced tea. And I think a lot of marijuana smokers are the same way. They're not smoking the joint to get high necessarily. They're relaxing. And you know, they may have 1 or 2 hits off it, and that's it. You know, I don't think you can say, and to say that one bad thing is compared, I don't consider marijuana bad.
Well, and take away the bad thing argument and think about it for people that are proponents of marijuana use, who think of it as the equivalent of alcohol.
Look at those happy faces. Because
you can point to alcohol as, you know, for a certain segment of the population, it's a poison. As soon as they drink it, they're in big trouble. You know, so you like to have a beer to relax. You like to, and you're thirsty.
Sure.
What's your explanation to somebody who's saying from the same point, I like to have a smoke?
Well, I guess I'll have to take their word for it. My experience, way back beyond the statute of limitations when I was in college, the experience I had with marijuana was that it makes, you know, it alters your consciousness in a way that alcohol doesn't. And what I meant was one bad thing and another. There's a lot of concern, and rightfully so, about people who are drunk getting behind a wheel and you know, driving. Do we then want to add another certain number of people who are stoned and get behind the wheel of a car and, you know, come at you and maybe see 2 or 3 cars and one of them is yours, you know, coming at you and pick the wrong one to miss? I just don't think it's a good idea.
You had mentioned that when you have too much to drink, you're still Ted Diadiun.
Right.
Your feeling back in the day
Yes.
was that you weren't the same
No,
person.
and that was my experience. I know everybody has different experiences, and you know, but I think that's something that can be quite dangerous, either on the road or to you personally. And I think it's a bad idea, as I said, to make people think, especially young people, that it's okay and it has a society's label of acceptance.
But what about personal responsibility? I mean, you know, you talk about this from your personal perspective, that marijuana had a terrible effect on you, so you don't want to use it anymore.
Right.
Well, why can't everybody kind of come to that same conclusion? Because we have, you know, smoking is legal, yet it you know, is more likely than not to kill you and maybe to kill those around you. Alcohol is legal, yet there are some who have the same reaction you did to marijuana, that they really can't just have a drink. They have to then have 30 drinks or you know, spend the whole week drunk. You know, these are not necessarily benign substances. They are legal, and we deal with the consequences of overuse with public education, with public health, through, you know, community and family pressure. And we as a state profit from these vices, if you will, through various taxes and things that pay for education and that pay for our development agencies. So I mean, I really think it is a little bit, you know, of a maybe unconscious duality, those who argue that marijuana should be treated differently.
Yeah, I suppose, you know, I don't really buy the state as pusher argument, but I think that to extend the problems that you already have with smoking and alcohol and everything else by legalizing something that's been illegal, and you know, I wouldn't have wanted to go to jail for my experimentation decades ago, but and I don't think people should, as you know, Sharon was saying. But I do think that it would be encouraging people who would not now do it to do it, and I think that's a bad thing. So.
Sharon, what do you say to the argument that the making it illegal, and there's clearly a huge demand for it, creates crime? The people who deal the drug, because of the demand, are involved in crime networks, and it involves in gun battles for territory, kind of like the Prohibition times. And if you legalized it, you would take a large part of that away. What's the counter argument to that?
Mm-hmm. That's a rather attractive argument, but on the other hand, when I was reading about the Colorado lawyer, he was saying that one of the problems with Colorado was that the weed was so expensive that really a black market still continued because the prices were much lower if you, I guess, you went to your neighborhood dealer who still had it. So that was kind of interesting to me, that just legalizing it and having a regulatory scheme around it actually had not helped because the prices were just too high. And as we know, we talked about edibles and things like that, and you know, and how it's more sophisticated research on it and hybridization and genetics and that kind of thing. And you know, I don't know, does that drive the price up so that way, you know, ordinary people who used to get it cheaply now still are on the black market?
Well,
that was an interesting
But
issue
you
for
can
me.
grow marijuana yourself.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but not everybody's going to choose to do that.
Well,
But it-
nonetheless,
It's
that
like
is-
saying that you
that's-
can make your own beer or wine. Yeah,
No,
but I don't
no.
think Ted's back
No,
there
all
in
you
his
do-
basement doing
It's much
it.
simpler than, you just grow it and you dry it, and that's it.
Right, but also, you know,
don't know
you're
about
you're
that.
introducing it into the marketplace, and it's going to become competitive. And I agree with Betsy about, you know, establishing these monopolies. Those are wrong. But I mean, if you put it in the marketplace, you're going to create a competitive market. And if the demand is out there, those prices are, you know, maybe for the high-end stuff, it is going to be, like with alcohol, a little more expensive. But you're also going to have a price range for everybody.
All right, let me shift the gears a little bit. There's some significant issues of this that nobody's quite dealt with, not in Colorado or elsewhere. They're still struggling. And one of it is the employment aspect. In no shape or form would employers be forced to take people who are smoking it. They could do the same thing that they do with the Cleveland Clinic does with cigarette smoking. You could ban it. So presumably you'd continue to test job applicants, and then anybody who smoked it would be deprived of a job. And I've heard several people in Columbus say, in a state where jobs are the #1 goal, this would make it harder for a certain portion of the population to get a job. You're going to be making it easier for them to be having a substance in their bloodstream that would prevent them from getting hired. It would be harder for employers to find qualified applicants. How do you address that?
Well, you know, I think that is an issue that employers already face. I mean, this is something we've editorialized about. One of the factors driving this skills gap is, or actually employment gap in some areas, is the fact that employers, you know, so many prospective employees are already failing drug tests, right? So this is already a problem, and it is something that needs to be addressed. I think that one of the impacts of legalization would be that you'd refine the measures for when the THC in your blood is actually impacting your behavior, your driving ability, and so on. That really is kind of a gap in the scientific medical knowledge right now. Maybe we can, you know, maybe that will be refined, and that would help these issues. And I believe in most cases, if you're, you know, as was stated, if there's anything that's going to impair your judgment about certain jobs, they're going to deny that.
But is that an argument for waiting? If the technology is not there for the employer, and I'd also like to talk a little bit about law enforcement, what's the rush? Why not wait then for that technology to be there before we have this debate?
Although this goes back to my overall argument that I think this should be legalized on a federal level, because a lot of what's impeding, say, somebody, in Colorado from, growing marijuana in their backyard, or hospitals from really investigating all of the medical ramifications of medical marijuana, or, states being able to look into this issue of, how do you create a breathalyzer for marijuana that's truly representative, is the fact that it's still criminalized at the federal level. And I frankly think that that's an issue that should be addressed.
Does everybody feel like they have enough information to be firm in their decisions?
No, not at all. I mean, I wish, for example, there was more research done in this country on marijuana, which I guess, everyone tells us is hard to do. We were supposed to get some European studies from the Responsible Ohio group. I don't believe that they ever arrived. No. And even if they did, I have a feeling that some will say yes and some will say no, but yeah, I definitely think that, for example, the U.S. should allow research on marijuana. I think that should be part of what's on the table.
I feel like from each of you, I'm hearing your decisions based on certain presumptions that I don't feel comfortable making because I just don't feel like I know enough. And so everybody here has firmly stated a position, and I guess what I'm asking is if we did get a lot more information, are these positions that you might change, or do you feel like you know enough to be firm in your resolve?
I'm firm on the case about the children, about what it does to the developing brain, for example, and about how society having a big sign that says you can do this now could affect young people. So I think I'm pretty firm on that. I'm not so sure about medical marijuana, but I am sympathetic to the argument that it could help some people who are in dire needs and are terminal. So, but more information would, I think help put me more firmly in one camp or the other.
Right.
And my objections are really philosophical and of long-standing about the effects of criminalization of drugs, basically, of any kind of drug, and therefore I don't think that more research would.
Would you go for that? You say any kind of drug, so cocaine, okay,
Yeah.
or heroin?
And I'm with Betsy. I mean, I think it's philosophical, but it's also rational, and it's also accepting the inevitable. I mean, when you look at polls, I mean, the majority of the American people favor legalization, and so to me, it's inevitable. It is going to happen, and so. Let's deal with it.
Because the jury's a little bit out. But say after 3 years of experience in Colorado, you saw a doubling of accidents or something that resulted from increased marijuana use. Would something like that change your thinking? Or if you saw that unemployment was rising quickly because so many more people were using it who couldn't get jobs, would that change your position? Or
no, I think what that would do is. Again, if it's legalized, then whether it's public education or whether it's developing testing techniques, people, like Ted was saying with alcohol, I mean, people are going to abuse drugs. So, part of our responsibility is to get those people into treatment facilities and get them the help they need. I don't think legalizing something like marijuana, you're going to see that. I don't believe that. But if that did happen, that would suggest that there was a gap in terms of education and treating people for this kind of abuse.
And then, of course, the employment would go up for people in treatment centers, helping people get over the
you got a job creator.
Drugs. I don't really have a problem with medical use, by the way. I mean, if the medical community can prove that helps people's symptoms, that helps with epilepsy and that, I think that's a valid use of it. I was interested that the group that came in to talk to us about it started out by talking about the 3-year-old kid with epilepsy, which what they're really talking about is the recreational use and expanding that. Medical. That's a different issue, I think.
Yeah, but with medical, I mean, again, it's an initial step, and maybe that's the way to go so you can test. But I mean, the fact is, when you legalize it for medical, you're in essence legalizing it because you're creating a market, and you need these medical cards, you're going to have doctors giving people medical cards.
Well, that's one
because they're-
system. You can do it in a much more prescribed form. It doesn't have to be that way for medical.
Right, but
That's
I'm
the way
saying
it has
they
worked
will-
in some states. It's been a de facto legalization.
Right, but people will game that system.
All right, deep divide. We have not made up our minds. There
Yes,
are
we have.
5 other members of the board, and not all of them feel as strongly as the people sitting beside me. We'd like to hear what you think. We'd like to know, do you want more information? Are there other questions you would like answered? Please let us know in the comments where you're watching this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.